Good morning, everyone. It's Carrie Holmes here with Workplace Education Manitoba. To start you off with today's Tuesday Tidbit, we have the wonderful Rochelle Amy ready to share with us this amazing topic of problem solving. And who doesn't have problems that need to be solved? I think maybe I'll have Rochelle over and she can solve my problems for me. Just as an introduction, a reminder that we have our little question box at the top if you have any private questions. Of course, we have the wonderful chat section, which most of you know by now is one of our favorite places to be. So loving to hear where you're joining us from today. And of course, emoji. Who doesn't love an emoji, especially on a Tuesday morning, right? So again, problem solving. We're going to look at the different processes and strategies for solving problems, determine best problem solving strategy to use for our workplaces, and keep sight of the variables at play, which I'm sure if we sat here and brainstormed for all of 30 seconds, we could come up with so many different variables. Hashtag COVID is one. And just as a note to friends, and I'm sure that Rochelle will bring this up later on, as we put together our fall lineup, we really feel that this is one that will be on there. And so if this is something of interest to you, we see this as a longer session. So keep that in mind. We are Workplace Education Manitoba, helping people to develop essential skills that are needed for work, learning, and life. And again, please take note of that. In the back of your mind, think about, how are these essential skills helping me in all areas of my life? We wanted to point out all of the wonderful workplace education and skills training centers that we have in the province. So many of them, and I love seeing where you're from to see where your closest West Center would be. And for us, right downtown here in Selkirk, we have a new location for those of you that haven't had a chance to check it out. We will be opening up in the fall here. And so that's located right across from the library in Selkirk. So feel free to pop by in the fall. Now, the 9 essential skills, many of you will be familiar with this slide. We're looking at oral communication, thinking, reading, continuous learning, document use, computer use, writing, working with others, and numeracy. We consider problem solving. You'll note that we touch and will touch on so many of these essential skills that are needed for both learning, workplace, and life. A big fat thank you to our contributors that make this training accessible to all Manitobans. We'd like to express the appreciation to the following: Employment and Social Development Canada and Manitoba Education and Training. This project was jointly funded through Human Resources Skills Development Canada and Entrepreneurship, Training and Trade. And of course, for more information, visit our website of wem.mb.ca. And now I would love to turn you over to Rochelle. Thanks, Rochelle.
Thank you, Carrie. Great to be able to join in with you all this morning. Obviously, none of you can see us today, and you wouldn't know. Carrie and I aren't even broadcasting from the same location, so it's pretty awesome how we can collaborate from no matter where we are, and it puts this in common for us as Manitobans to be able to dig in on content like this. Who out there, by using your emoji, could give me a thumbs up if you agree with this statement, thumbs down if you're sort of like, that's just kind of jargon. So what do you feel about problems and growth and what that opportunity looks like? Does it excite you as a gift and as a growth opportunity? Thumbs up. If it sort of gives you the meh feeling, thumbs down, or there you go. You guys know how to use the emojis. I love it. That's awesome. It's probably true depending what the problem is, right? So some of the problems that present themselves, it's easy to see what the gain and the growth opportunity and the dividends will be. Others, not so much. We're going to dig in here today to look at really how to get there to this place of the dividends. So it's easy to see that problem solving can sometimes affect the quality of our work. Maybe if you're manufacturing and making a product, problem solving is paramount, right? Because you're honing in on prototypes and development, and it's going to affect what you actually make. But beyond that type of a setting, when we're dealing with all kinds of different issues that come up in the workplace, it can affect everything from how the customers relate to us, the kind of money we're making, and the efficiency we have in our workplace, and ultimately that reputation that we have outside of our own doors. So it's helpful to sort of get an understanding of, what do I feel like? What's my physical response, my mental response when these problems come up? There are some people who run right towards the problem. They can't wait to dig their teeth in and solve it. And if that's you, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. I think that's the rare group that want to run into it and solve it. If you take some of our personality workshops with us, you'll see that there's just, a quarter of the population who might be tempted to do that. And even at that, whether they actually do it is another hurdle. And then there's those maybe on the other extreme who, instead of running towards a problem to solve it, might run away from it. So I've had it said to me from a friend that actually they'll go out of their way and make their life harder just to avoid a problem. And then those of us who are analytical too, sometimes we can take something small and make it mighty because we have to overthink all of the details in it. Can you relate to any of the categories? Does anything resonate with you that it might be touch on a little bit of how you operate? I know out of what I've shared, definitely I can relate with one of these for sure. And don't just point fingers at what everyone else relates to, because the problem solving really starts with ourselves. And an important question to ask that I feel like a lot of go-getters jump right past is this first one of recognizing, is it actually my problem? So sometimes the problems come to you because you're actually really good at making quick decisions. You're really good at assessing risk and thinking logically. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's your problem to solve. And that's sort of a critical piece, not really because I'm suggesting that you shouldn't step on people's toes, but it sort of touches on your capacity, right? If everything becomes your problem to solve in the workplace because you're sort of the go-to problem solver, you sort of run yourself short of what your capacity is to do your best tasks with your best energy. Another self-assessment question when a problem's in front of you is, what's it touching on with fears and egos? So the problem may touch on certain fears that would guide you into decision making just to protect those fears. I don't want to get fired. I don't want to look stupid. I don't want to lose this customer. What fears is it driving up? And to be aware of those so that you don't make the decisions and that solve the problems based on solving your fear, but actually on what's best for the problem at hand. And then of course, ego, right? Who doesn't love to be the superhero? Well, that you do want to be mindful of that, because solving problems in a way to stroke your ego or make it look like you were the problem solver, you did it, that can sometimes undermine, or often undermine, the company's bigger goals. And then who, of course, would be involved? Are there others who should be involved in tackling this? Are there other people who will be impacted by what the decisions are? And is there an exclusion or exclusion component to the whole solving of the problem? Love the feedback. Absolutely agree. 100%. Thanks for using the chat box, folks. It's a great way for us to learn from each other and build on each other's energy. When we hold our problem-solving workshops, and I encourage you to just look this fall, we'll be launching a whole new rollout in September of what's happening this fall. And I think problem-solving will be one of our longer workshops where we're going to be able to dig in and actually work through some of these methods in a way that equips you to be able to use them. For today, we're just doing sort of the 10,000-foot view, and we're going to look at some of the common ways that people use a strategy to solve problems in the workplace. I want to touch on 4 of them with you. There's actually more than this, and go ahead and do some research to find the strategy that works the best for you. But I'll touch on 4 because maybe you automatically always lean towards the questioning method. That's probably the most common one. But here's a few more tools to just toss into that toolbox of yours. First, the ideal method. So this method for problem solving just uses the acronym IDEAL. And it asks problem solvers to first identify the source of the problem, define the context that it's happening in, explore various solutions or strategies, of course, act on it would be next, and then the one that most people hate to do because there's never enough time in our work days to do it is to look back and actually evaluate the process of what happened with that problem solving. Has anyone used this particular method for problem solving? Maybe you didn't use the IDEAL acronym, but maybe in some of your problem solving, this sort of flow would have been what you do in the workplace to tackle a problem. Then we have this interesting one. The Ishikawa method is a Japanese method to be able to visualize how the problem could be solved. So you identify that the main bones to the skeleton is the actual problem. It's the most obvious thing. It's the biggest thing. But then from there, we look at the whole skeleton of the problem and we identify what are the different categories of the problem that's happened, and sometimes there's subcategories within that, and so you can add as many fish bones as you need on each of those category branches. And then we want to look at the bottom part of the skeleton to identify different causes. So how did this happen? Why did this happen? When did this happen? And we again can build on that fishbone diagram, build on that skeleton in identifying the various causes. Now, if you love flowcharts, show me an emoji if you're a flowchart maniac. If you love flowcharts and maps and getting your information written down and documented in a pathway, this is a method you might want to adopt for some of your problem solving tools with your teams. And see, those logical thinkers, they love these diagrams. And so this is one that's really fun to do with a team, because you could even identify that your team, each person or each subgroup would deal with a different aspect of this. So give them a different category, identify the various subcategories, and then the causes related to it. And then team 2 would look at another category. So it is a cool way to be able to synergize within a team setting. And then the questioning technique. I feel like when we talk about problem solving, this is a pretty common, intuitive one that many of us use because we learned about the who, what, when, where, why, and how back in grade school. And if we look at the 7 questions that we could ask about the problem, what's the problem? What is it really? What's the root of it? Who is the problem? Is it a person? Who affected it? Who will it affect? Who caused it? And we can dig with each of those who, what, when, where, how questions a little deeper and expand them. And then the business component that we don't want to forget is the how. So it's the how often does this happen? How many people has this happened to? How many times has it happened? And how much in quantifying, what's the impact, what's the reach, how can we put a number or a measure to it? Show me an emoji if you're a questioning technique person. I feel like a lot of parents have this skill because we have to ask a lot of questions to figure out the context of the problem happening before we can actually solve it. Yeah, this is a good one because intuition goes a long way with this one. But you can see it's not as tidy as the fishbone diagram, right? So recognizing within teams that what feels really comfortable and soft on the skin to one feels really itchy to the other, because these two in the center are a little bit like opposite ways of getting there. And then who's our right brain thinkers out there? People like Carrie and I. Are you a right brainer? Are you creative? Do you like to color outside the lines sometimes? Well, the 7 ways is an interesting problem solving technique to be aware of, because you're really challenging your brain to think creatively. So for every problem that there is, you need to give a minimum of 7 alternatives. And with the 7 alternatives, you determine a rubric on how to measure that. So we're going to measure if we use that alternative and we looked at how much would it cost, what would the benefits be, what would the efficiencies be, we're going to rate those maybe on a number scale of say 1 to 5. And then for each of the 7 alternatives and their evaluation criterion, we are going to give them a tally or a score. And the one solution that has the best score out of 7, that's the one we're going to pick. Now, if you work in a workplace where you're measuring numbers a lot, right? So you're using real hard data on why you're doing what you're doing, the 7 ways is a great way to give some proof and some evidence to your research, because 7 alternatives is pretty robust. Most of us don't look for 7 alternatives when we're solving a problem. And if we attach a numerical rubric to it, this can really boost your problem-solving record keeping in the future, so that you know, hey, in the year 2020, we ranked cost really high. We wanted to know in our problem solving that how it affected the bottom line was the biggest thing, and that's the criteria we put the most emphasis on. And so we had cost as a scoring category 3 times, worded 3 different ways. But maybe in 2025, we recognize it's really about efficiency, because maybe our workforce changed, and so really time efficiencies became the most important thing. So in measuring year to year, this is sort of a helpful one, because you can give numerical quantification to why you made the choices you made. Now that's a lot to take in, isn't it? Breathe. We don't have to solve the problem yet on which method we're going to use. We just have to adopt this way of thinking, of recognizing that as we change our thinking and we change our methods, we're able to not keep creating the same problems that we are faced with time and time again. And out of those strategies, it is kind of fun to try the different strategies. You don't just need to lock in on the one and make it, that's the way I do it. Maybe there's a different strategy depending which team you're working with. Once you've picked a strategy to solve the problem, especially if you're collaborating with someone else, it's looking deeper and saying, how does that strategy fit with also the preferred values of my workplace? So each workplace is going to have different values that they emphasize as their key values for their employees and their clients. It can be quite complex. Every social environment, such as a workplace environment, puts decision-making right at the top. It considers it one of the highest things that contributes to the efficiency and the satisfaction within a workplace. So although problem solving as a phrase isn't really something we talk about day to day, you don't say, hey, what problems are you going to solve today? Doesn't happen a lot that way in the workplace. And yet we think of, what do people vent about in the workplace? That's really the problem solving that needs to happen, right? They're recognizing deficiencies and the way rubs are happening that aren't working out so great, and recognizing that the decision-making, problem-solving skills there are the key thing to creating the efficiency in that space. So imagining we were a production clerk at a car manufacturing plant. Let's just imagine what's going to go into helping some of our decision-making. We are responsible for inspecting parts and deciding if they meet quality standards. We get a large batch of parts and we see that the quality is actually questionable. If we ordered new parts altogether, that would be a huge impact in time and money on the plant. Or do we use these poorer quality parts that could cause other problems? Because we're in this manufacturing setting, it's fast-paced. Anyone in that kind of setting, fast-paced, one misstep, and it can have huge impacts on the production line. And of course, the company itself has an excellent reputation for meeting high quality standards. Well, I'd love to dig into this scenario a bit with you, and we could problem solve it together. And that's something we can do in another problem solving workshop. But I just want to give you a little bit of a picture of some factors to take into the decision making. So no matter which of the 4 types of decision making tools you decide to use, there's other questions you can bring in. So should we be looking at the company's policies and procedures? Should that be some kind of guideline in where we go? Who should we approach about this? Does anyone else need to know, or am I the only one who needs to know? And where's the impact of where these extra parts would come from? Do we make them? Do we ship them in? Are there any supply chain issues we need to be aware of? And then whoever's above me, there's probably someone above you. And even if you're at the very top of the organizational chart, do you have a board you report to also? Who is the person around you who holds you accountable? Some of those people really want or need to be the problem solver. They might have enough skin in the game that they have to answer for every solution that's given. Or do you have a really trusting supervisor who doesn't have the time or capacity to be able to solve all the problems, and so they just want to jury them? They just want to say, hey, bring me a couple solutions and we'll get there, or just run with it. It can be confusing if you've worked for different people with different desires on being the problem solvers. Anyone out there worked with more than one way here, where your supervisor wants to be in on every decision, and then your next supervisor wants to be in on no decisions, and you're quite in the dark? Thank you. I have too. And talk about adaptability, right? It's like, I hope I know that I got this right on what this person wants. And that, of course, can change with production flow too. There's just times of the year that your supervisor doesn't have the capacity to do it. So just taking those things into consideration helps us in our rubric of how we're going to solve the problem. I love this quote: "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced." And so facing towards the problem and digging in is absolutely key in progress. And what are your values? See how that's sort of in air quotes there? What are your values? Some values you have are your own intrinsic values that you've brought with you no matter where you go. But it's in air quotes because what are your shared values in the workplace? Are you aware of what your culture, your workplace demands in what the values are? So some workplaces, the customer's always right. In other workplaces, the customer's not always right. What's your value in your company? In some settings, it's people first and then profitability. I know one successful business that runs right now that gives all of its profits to charity. So they run their business, they take their profits, and then that's all given away to a charity. So that drives even how they produce and what they produce in terms of profitability and how it works with handling people. Or is it profitability in order to keep people employed? That's an important value to know in your workplace. Does your supervisor have a value that they don't really care what you do or anything else, but they just want to know that you did it the way they said? Or are they the opposite? It can be so confusing. I had a wonderful supervisor, one of my favorite people to work for, that she was just like, just get there. I don't care how you get there, but just get there. If something's due on this day at this time, can you just produce the goods? But I don't care if you go up and down and all around to get there, as long as I know you're going to have it done at that time. I loved working for her because that just fueled my creative passions to be able to get there and do it. But that would be terrifying to other people because they'd say, how would I know if I made the decision right? How will I know if you'll question my process? And what's the other values in your company as it relates to the bottom line? Is the bottom line the actual bottom line, or is there a bigger value? Once you have those understandings of the values your company has and those drive you towards the methodology for solving the problem, how do I take that into my team? Well, we first want to always reiterate the values or sometimes the mission. We want to underscore our goals, not just as a company, but as a team. What are we aiming towards? For some teams, the problem's not solved unless we laughed along the way. So there are some goals along the way that don't even impact the customer, but they impact us as a team. And let's never forget to identify the root problem, because the only thing that can make us more crazy than we already are is having the same problem over and over because we never deal with the root of it. And then, of course, we have to execute. We have to make the actual decision and do the things, right? The challenge is usually it looks like this. The do the things happens first, because sometimes the problem that needs to be solved is crisis. Anyone in crisis mode all the time out there? There's some systems and processes in companies that create an environment where we just got to do the things. We just got to get it done and make it happen. And doing the things can sometimes skew everything else because we're in that crisis control mode. So if that's the reality, it's just recognizing that within the team, we can take a step back and break it down into these chunks that benefit everybody. Who loves John Maxwell? Great leadership thinker, great leadership teacher. And I love when he challenges us to think that it's better for you to say it than for someone else to whisper it. And sometimes it's your customer whispering what the problem is and never telling you. So it's better for you to face it and just deal with it than to let it all happen behind your back. So looking at that environment that you're in, making the decision, this is another very real thing. An environment doesn't just mean structure that you're in. It's also the company culture and the team that you're in. There's a whole matrix for understanding what is your decision environment management. So you can have a problem and you can have a method to solve the problem, but above that and all around that, what's the environment in the workplace? What's the environment for how we tackle problems, questions, and workloads? So if this interests you to dig in deeper, there's another decision environment management inventory that you can dig into where you work with 17 questions about what the workplace is actually like and what that impact has on employees as they work through problem solving. And again, that's something we dig in deeper in our workshop, but I wanted to just put it out there for you to do some more research if that's of interest to you. Working together always brings the winning together. Collaboration is multiplication. Truth bomb right there. 100%, a million percent. Another quick scenario to look at, and this is more food for thought, is that whole concept of the restaurant where it's super busy and the server's dumped on with this big, huge concern. Well, what are some of the things that would go into decision making on how to solve that problem? Policies and procedures, company values, who should know, who should be involved in dealing with it, and then what's the ripple effect if that customer's need does not get met? Will there be any ripple effect on other people? So solving the problem sometimes isn't as simple as, oh, here's your meal comped. Sometimes it's, what are the ripple effects beyond that? So take those in to your decision making. On some different practical tips and tricks for problem solving and having your head in the game, I love this one mentioned down here with the AROTA acronym. Asking someone to take responsibility, to take ownership, to establish a timeline, and to be kept accountable. So that's another great acronym to jot down. Instead of just jumping to the game plan and how that's going to look, but really empowering the person you're working with, be it a colleague or a customer, for them to take responsibility. So that we can stop the bleeding on the deepest part of the problem and the most immediate part, deal with the roots, and then keep it from happening again. Now, if you do love the technical, analytical, and you need to sometimes even cover your butt, Here is a tool I want you to take away with you. Jot those down. Your problem, your challenges, your chosen solution, the results, and what you learned from it. Keep this log on some of those important problems and even minor problems that you're facing in the workplace so that you have a way to measure and you have a reference point about why you did what you did. And this is a nod to that collaboration that is always more comfortable to make those problem-solving major decisions in collaboration instead of isolation. When we do these things and employ these tools, the dividends, of course, come to us personally, that we have margin, we can breathe, we've solved a problem, and we can move on. It always impacts the culture of the group we work with, and often the actual processes and procedures. And then, of course, that relationship with the external stakeholders and the reputation of our company. That brings us to a close of our tidbit, and we just fast forwarded through so much great content. And we just want to encourage you to take a look ahead at some of our upcoming tidbits. These ones mentioned on the screen are the Tuesday tidbits, so those 30-minute leadership development pieces that you can employ in your own workplace. And then beyond this, watch our website for more announcements on what's coming up. And I'm just going to pop that in the chat for you. So if you make a note of weminterlake.ca, right now it shows you these listings of what's happening this summer. And then a little later in August, we'll announce all of the fall lineup for you. And we hope to have you with us. Carrie, any parting words for us?
I would just say go forth and be awesome, everyone. Lots of problems, lots of solutions. And my very favorite quote is working together. Have an awesome day, everybody. We look forward to spending time with you again next week.